Sorry, I was thinking that the questions were going to come first, but just kidding. Um, hey, everybody. It's good to be with you all tonight. We'll get started with the 7 habits of highly effective teens. Tonight, we're going to talk about habit 5, which is seek first to understand, then to be understood. So I'm Dakia Davis. Please feel free to call me Kia. I'm a social worker and a therapist. I'm here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm actually from Raleigh. And if you want to find out more about me or kind of what I do, then you can go to my website at www.healingjourneync.com.
And hey, everybody, my name is Nyko. I'm a school psychologist at Broughton and Enlow High Schools. And before we get started, can you guys put in the chat what grades is everybody in tonight? I'm curious. You just type in what your chat, what grade are you in?
Nice.
10th, rising 10th. Awesome. 11th, great. Rising 8th grader. Okay, that sounds good. All right.
Okay.
Thanks for letting us know.
Yeah. So again, good to see everyone. And we'll go ahead and tackle this. I also just want to say kudos to y'all for either having read this book or you're working through the book during your summers and or at the beginning of your school year. I think it's really awesome that you're just working on ways to improve your communication skills, which is what we are talking about tonight. So habit 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. So the idea behind this is that communication is one of the most important skills, if not the most important skills of our lives. And so, yes, so seek first to understand and then to be understood. In other words, listen first and talk second. So, if you're like me, your tendency might be to swoop in like Superman, as is mentioned in the book, to solve people's problems before you understand them. Most times, this does not help to get our point across. This doesn't help to meet the needs of others or get our own needs met. So, in the 7 habits of highly effective teens, having power and influence with people is summed up in this one sentence, which is seek first to understand and then to be understood. Again, so in other words, we want to listen first and then talk second. And so here they talk about the biggest communication problem we have is that we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. And I believe Ina's going to go ahead and talk more about that and how we can develop maybe some better listening skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you guys look through the book, you're going to see that there are 5 poor listening styles in this chapter. And we're going to spend the next couple of minutes to figure out how to, first of all, identify what they are. And then how do we overcome these listening problems so that you can become a champion in any situation. When you take a look at this next slide, I want you to post in the chat, what do you think of when you see that picture? What comes to mind when you see this person? Anxiety, okay. Imagination. Oh, I love that one. Creativity. Something on your mind. Fabulous. Yes, exactly. If we look at the next slide. So when I saw that picture, I thought of spacing out. And sometimes we space out for any of those reasons we just talked about. You're feeling anxious or you're thinking about something, you're being creative, you've got something on your mind. But one of the things that happens when we're not listening correctly is that we space out. Sometimes somebody's talking to us, but we ignore them because our mind is off wandering and thinking about something else. We might be thinking about, what am I having for dessert tonight? For those of us who already had dinner, what are we having for dessert after we finish this call? Or what am I going to do this weekend? Because it's Friday, tomorrow's Friday night. What am I going to do? Or who's going to go see that new Marvel movie that's coming out? You might be distracted by those things. But what would happen if you always, somebody is talking to you and they have something really important to say, but you're caught up in your own thought? What would happen? Post in the chat room. What would happen if your friends were talking and you started to space out on a regular basis? How would they feel? Annoyed. Oh my gosh, isn't that the truth? How else would people feel? They would feel disconnected. Oh, good one. Ignored. Excellent. Yes. Unheard. Wow. Great ones. Confused. Absolutely. So I think if you did that on a regular basis, people would be like, huh, what's going on with this person? Am I not interesting? They might feel like, that something's wrong. Maybe that you weren't interested in all of that. And really when you start to space out, you end up missing a lot of what's going on. And again, we all space out, but we want to try to keep that in check. And the second point that I'm going to talk about is that pretend listening. So we're not really paying attention to the other person because we're spacing out about something else, but at least we pretend that we're listening. So every so often they're saying something and you hear a pause and you go, yeah, or uh-huh, or cool, or sounds great. I do that with my sister. Don't ever tell her that. Sometimes we're on the phone and she's talking about something I'm not interested in, and I say something. But when I think about it, how do you think she feels when I'm just saying stuff to kind of fill that pause? Post in the chat. Unloved. Wow. Yeah. And that's never what I want her to. Yeah, she might feel upset. I don't ever want her to make her feel unloved, but sometimes she could feel that way. You're right. Because sometimes I'm just feeling distracted, or I'm caught up in my own thoughts. So that's just something else we want to be aware of, is that pretend listening. And if we look at the third point, is selective listening. We pay attention only to the part of the conversation that interests us. So your friend might be telling you how it feels to be, the shadow of their brother. Their brother is the one who just enlisted in the military and the army, and they're doing really well. And your friend is saying, "Gosh, I hate or I feel really bad because my brother's doing so well, and my parents kind of look at me like you're not doing anything special." And when you were telling your friend about that, all they heard was the word army. And all you heard was army. And you're like, oh, yeah, army. I've been thinking about that a lot. Or I don't believe in the army. So sometimes when you hear one word, you're focused just in on that. Right. And so again, the person who is speaking doesn't feel valued. They don't feel like you really heard what it was that they had to say. And since you're always talking about what you want to talk about instead of what the other person wants to talk about, it becomes more difficult for you to have that long lasting relationship, because we know relationships are back and forth, and sometimes you're talking, sometimes the other person is talking, and they're sharing things that are really deep and meaningful to them. And I found this cartoon, and it's kind of silly, and it says, and our parents say this to us all the time, about you must have selective hearing, because mom's like, I've asked you to clean your bedroom 7 times, and dad's like, listen to your mom, and the kids are like, what? Like they're tuned out, and then the parents are like, psst, don't tell the kids I want to share a candy bar, and the kids are like, what did you say? So that's just kind of a silly example of that selective listening. Sometimes we give the impression that we're paying attention, and sometimes we give the impression that perhaps we're not. And if we look at the fourth one, the next one, the listening errors that we make is called word listening. So this happens when we're actually paying attention to what someone is saying, but we're only listening to the words and not the body language and the feelings and the true meanings behind the word. So, for example, let's say your friend Kim and you are talking, and she goes, what do you think of Ronaldo? And you're like, yeah, Ronaldo's pretty cool, I guess. But if you're really listening to some of the other things, and listening, I mean, you're looking at her body language and maybe to her tone of voice, you might have heard that she was trying to ask you something else. Anyone have any ideas what she might have really been trying to ask in this situation? She could have been upset, maybe so. What else? How else was she's like, what do you think of Ronaldo? Haven't heard from Christian in a while. And Dustin, what do you think? Everybody's going quiet. Oh my goodness. She might be interested in him. Keenan, thank you. Yes. So maybe that's what she's asking you when she says, "What do you think of him?" She's actually thinking, "Wow, I really like him. Do you think he likes me?" So because we focus just on the words that she was saying, you might be missing out on what's really being said. So if you focus only on the words, you're going to miss the deeper meaning of what's in people's hearts. And then the fifth area that we want to, the type of listening errors, is the self-centered listening. So this happens when we see everything from our own perspective. So instead of standing in somebody else's shoes or their perspective, we kind of look at everything from our perspective. Has anyone ever I'm going to say, Ms. Kia, has anyone ever said to you, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel"? Has anyone ever said that to you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've said it to other people. Yep.
Yeah. And so when that happens, how does it make you feel?
Like I'm not really being heard, like someone's bringing the conversation back to them instead of just listening, and being present with me.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes people say, "Oh, I know exactly what you're thinking," but they don't actually know exactly what I'm thinking, because we don't know what it's like to be in that person's shoes, like to live their life, to be their authentic self, and we just assume when we say things like that, "Oh, yeah, I know how you feel." We kind of assume that everybody thinks the same way that we do, right? So it would be like somebody saying, "Hey, you should do this because this would be great for you," and you're like, "But I don't really like that." Um, so that's something for us to be, kind of be focused in on. And sometimes when people say that, "Oh, I know exactly what you feel," it's because they kind of want to do this one upsman. They kind of want, "Oh yeah, whatever you had, but I had it
Mhm.
worse. I had it better. I had it more intense." Those are the kinds of things when we use that expression, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel." So when we also look at self-centered learning and we're listening from our point of view, kind of like the underlying thing there there's three things that might be going on in those situations for us as the listener. We might be judging, we might be advising, or we might be probing. So let's take a look at those three and see what's going on with what those three mean. So when I think of judging, sometimes as we listen to others, we make judgments into the back of our mind. Sometimes they don't come out and say it. And of course, sometimes they do. Sometimes we roll our eyes and we kind of make that face, or we look at our friend and kind of giggle or something. But we make that judgment and about what the person's saying and what they're doing. And if you think about it, if we're judging, are we really listening to what a person is saying? Because we're kind of, again, coming back to us. And a person who's really listening is focused in on what a person's saying. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be judged. I really want somebody to hear what I'm saying. The next one is called advising. And this is where you get advice from your own experience. And sometimes our parents do this because they say, "Oh, when I was your age," or when our grandparents or aunts or uncles, "Oh, when I was your age, I used to do." And sometimes we've got like if you're a brother and a sister, and the sister comes up to the brother and she really needs him to listen, and she goes, "I don't like this new school. Ever since here I am, it's a brand new year, and I just feel like I don't fit in. I wish I could find something that, made me feel better. I wish I had could find some friends." So instead of listening to what that person was saying, meaning that she was feeling kind of like an outcast, her brother might say, "Wow, and you should join a club because that's how I met friends." So again, giving advice from his perspective rather than focusing in on what his sister was how she was feeling. And then the last self-centered learning is listening, I should say, is probing. So what we're doing is you kind of digging and kind of going back over and over and over and asking a person questions that they're not prepared to answer. Like sometimes, I don't know if any of this has happened to you guys. You come home from work and somebody in your family says, "How was your day?" And you're like, "Fine," because it wasn't really fine, but you don't want to talk about it. And then they're like, "Well, that's not enough." And then they go, "So who'd you hang out with?" "Oh, I hang out with Betsy." "Oh, well, what'd you have for lunch?" Pizza." Like, you don't want to answer these questions, but they keep coming and firing them at you. And sometimes it just feels like somebody's intruding on your space. And I don't know about you, but if somebody's firing those types of questions at me, even though they're doing it from a love perspective, and I'm not ready to talk, it just makes me feel like I want to shut down. And then I just kind of close down and then I don't really share any more information. All right, Miss Kia, what about genuine listening? Let's switch from problematic listening to genuine listening.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Looks like okay. I am. My mic is on. Great. So we'll go over genuine listening, which is basically the kind of listening that can lead to like improved communication, which is what we're striving for. Um, and so I liked this pie chart that was in the book because it talks about how, listening involves your eyes, your heart, and your ears. Like really good listening does. So like 7% of listening involves like just talking and using our words. 53% is our body language, and then 40% is like, the feeling or the tone behind what we're saying. And so I thought that that was a really cool graph to check out. I think it's on page like 258 or 9 or something. Um, and then, oop, sorry, we can actually go back. Sorry about that. And so then to hear what people are really saying, we have to listen or pay attention to like what they're not saying. So you can notice if someone changes the meaning of their sentence by emphasis. So like there's some examples in the book, but something that I thought was maybe more relatable could be like, what's up? So if I say like, hey Regine, like what's up? Right? That sounds like a greeting. I want to know how her day is. But if I say, ooh, Regine, like what's up? That might give her a sense that like something's off. Like, I don't know if you all have other phrases or things that could be taken multiple ways or not. But I thought the what's up was pretty common for us. And so no matter how hard people might appear on the surface, I think we're all pretty tender inside, and we want to be understood. And so using all of these, our eyes, our heart, and our ears, helps us to get that understanding across. All right, now I'm ready for the next slide. Sorry about that. Yeah, so a great way, right, to understand people or to have better understanding is to stand in their shoes. We can consider different points of view to help us become better communicators. Sometimes when we talk to people, it might feel like this back and forth, this like kind of confrontation, competition. Earlier it was mentioned like one upping or kind of like all of those things, probing. It might just feel like more self-centered, like what am I getting out of this? But getting in someone else's shoes helps to understand where they're coming from. It's not about a versus, like anyone could be right or wrong or neutral or whatever. The goal is not to win. um, and so then here I say, use empathy to improve your communication skills. So when I read this chapter, I thought a lot about the word empathy. Does anyone know like what empathy is, or have an idea? Is anyone familiar with that term or that action to be empathetic? Okay. So essentially, using empathy just really requires us again to use someone else, look at things from someone else's perspective. And being empathetic requires us to share our emotions. So, like, if you're feeling sad because a friend is sad, that's empathy. Like, man, Betsy didn't have a good day today. Like, I really feel that. I could see how, maybe she's not wanting to talk much. It's also understanding someone else's way of seeing things. I think an example that we have is like, maybe your dad or your parents mad at you or feels a way because the room's not tidy, and maybe you're thinking I'm fine with that pile of clothes being there, but just look at like why might they be upset? Why might your parent feel upset about that, or why might that irritate them? It could be then that's extra work for them, or they may not feel respected or appreciated. We can go to the next slide. I obviously really like talking about empathy, so I included this video. I don't know that we will have time today, but the link is here in the slideshow for later. You can also search for Brene Brown empathy. So this video, it's an animated talk on empathy by a social worker and a professor named Brene Brown. It's a pretty popular video. I've seen it in a bunch of trainings. It's really cute and I think easy to grasp. So if you search for it, hopefully you'll find it helpful too to understand more about empathy. Okay. So we are encouraged to practice mirroring. And so the goal of mirroring is to reflect, repeating back in your own words what the other person is saying and feeling. So not mimicking, right? So we want to repeat the meaning, use our own words, and then also be warm and caring, which involves us not to just speak, but also to make sure that our body language matches like our words, right? So if I'm coming to you like, I really want to understand what you're saying, but like I don't look like it, then I'm not going to be very effective in communicating. Does anyone want to give an example of mirroring? Anyone have any ideas? Okay, I'll go ahead and just use an example here from the book. A son wants to borrow the family car, and the son and the dad aren't really communicating very well about it. So the son says, "You never let me take the car. I always have to get a ride, and I'm sick of it." Right? um, but a better way, and then the dad comes back. If there's a back and forth, I won't go completely into it. But a better way could maybe be saying something like, I feel like maybe there's a schedule we can do or an agreement we can have around the car. Or it seems like maybe you have different needs for the car than I do. And like really asking dad, like, what's up with the car? Or is there anything I can do to better, earn your trust for borrowing the car? Um, and be mindful of the time and the place. So while being empathetic and using mirroring sounds great, it might sound kind of formal or kind of fake depending on who you're talking to. It might not, the way you would talk to a friend or a parent or a teacher, it's all different. So if you could, just be a little mindful about the time and the place. All right.
And maybe even like if you had the car thing, because some of us, some of our folks tonight are at that point. You might say, so what would it take in order for me to be able to use the car on a more regular basis, and just kind of asking a question that way,
Mhm.
and that might get an answer out of them that you hadn't, or maybe gives them an opportunity to respond in a way
Yeah.
that they might not otherwise.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. And then I think, maybe to better see or have better examples of mirroring, these phrases are offered. So some of the phrases are like, as I get it, you felt that. So as I see it, I can see that you're feeling, you feel that. So what you're saying is, these are statements that are kind of supposed to act more like questions because you want someone to confirm this. So if you say, so I see you're really mad about me using the car. Or, maybe the dad would say, I feel like you're really angry with me about using the car. It's a question because we want the conversation to continue. And so maybe the son could say, you're right. I really want to use the car tonight because I have practice, or it's important to me that blah, blah, blah. Or the dad could say, I just feel like we don't really talk unless we're talking about when you need the car. I wish we could spend time together. So what we want are to use phrases that just are encouraging more communication between folks. Um, right. So this wraps up the genuine skills. Am I on the right side? Yeah, sorry, I have a different side of here. So we're wrapping up the three
That's right.
genuine listening skills in Habit 5. And so we're going to talk more about what those skills can look like in action. So like communicating with your parents. So the chapter suggests that if you want to improve your relationship with your parents, that you can try listening to them like you would a friend. And I know you might think, I would never talk to my parents the way that I would a friend. But it says to listen to them like you would a friend, right?
Right.
So practice the skills that you've been talking about, like mirroring, pay attention to body language, using empathy. Um, and then asking questions like, how was your day? Is there anything I could do to help around the house? Is there anything that you need right now? Or what would you like to talk about? Maybe just open that up for your parents. This is a way to better understand them and strengthen your relationship. This can help you gain a greater respect for your parents. They can also gain greater respect for you because you're better able to see each other from your different perspectives. It's also a good way to, it's a way to get your way more often, not in a manipulative way, but it just shows more willingness to understand. It makes people more flexible and then therefore more trusting. I will go ahead and turn it back over to you, Ina, to talk about examples of genuine listening in
All
action.
right. Thanks, Kia. So when we're thinking about communicating with teachers, and that's like everybody's going back to school. If you're not already at school, you're going back to school on August 23rd. And by the way, we are so excited to see you guys. But so it's been a long time since we've been in the classroom, right? And so now we got to figure out, how do I communicate with our teachers? Because that's what teachers say. They're willing to work with students, but how do you do that? So the first thing I would recommend is, when we think about all the things that we shouldn't do and what we should be doing, first of all, you want to make an appointment to talk with your teacher. That way, it's not like they're on the rush to their next class period. You might make an appointment to meet with them during their planning period or during your lunch or right after school or before school. That way, the teacher knows that you want to have some time, and that way it's just time devoted to you without distractions. You also want to plan what you say. So if you're not satisfied with your grade, or you wanted to appeal a grade that you earned, or you wanted to talk about an extension on an assignment, you want to kind of plan out what you're there to talk about. And then you want to problem solve. So if there's something that you weren't satisfied with, how do we then twist, to fix it so that it goes better in the future? And so you kind of come up with a problem solving, and maybe you would say, so I can't turn an assignment in because I've got a big football game on Friday, and I can't do it on Thursday night. So could I have an extension and turn it in on Monday, for example? And then really listen to what your teachers are saying. You remember how we talked about sometimes kids are listening to respond? So when a teacher says, you know what, your grades, you've got a 56 because you didn't turn in an assignment, you're like, yeah, but wait, here's why I did that. So instead of maybe doing that, then really listen to what the teacher's saying. The teacher's saying, so when you're in class, I don't see you paying attention. And when she says that, or he says that, so what they're seeing is they don't see that body language. They don't see you looking at them and kind of watching them with your eyes as they walk around the classroom. They don't see you sitting up and looking in the direction where somebody's talking. Some kids are, believe it or not, they put their heads on their desk, and then teachers are like, wow, they're not really paying attention. So your body language is communicating something completely different. And maybe you're tired because something happened last night. But if you could tell your teacher, hey, I'm really having a rough day today because I was tired. We had to stay up late last night because we had to take the dog to the vet. Then teachers would be more willing to work with you. All right, I've got a cat in the background who's making all sorts of noise. Oh my goodness, Howard. Excuse me 1 second. Um, it's always something. And then when we're thinking about listening with our friends and our peers and our friends, try not to space out, like we were saying a minute ago. Sometimes you're going to, like right now, I've got this cat who's kind of doing things that are distracting to me, and so I'm trying to focus and trying to keep on what's going on. Try not to offer advice just for no reason, but you might ask somebody. You could say, I know you didn't ask for my opinion, but can I offer it to you? And then a friend might say, no, I don't want to hear it. And then you're like, okay. But sometimes a friend might say, all right, go ahead, I'm ready. And then you can offer your opinion. And if a friend says no, then you have to honor that, even though you have the best solution in the world, right? Don't pretend to listen. If you have something on your mind, your friend says, "Oh, I got to really talk to you about something. Something happened last night at home, or something happened in my job, or the person I liked, something happened," and you're like, you know what, I just can't focus right now. I really want to. I just can't focus right now. That way, they know that ahead of time going into the situation, so that you're not pretend listening. Share your feelings. If somebody says something that you're happy about or that's upsetting or distressing, then tell them in appropriate words, like Ms. Kia had said a few minutes ago about some of the ways that you can share using the I statements. Instead of saying, wow, you make me feel, you could say, I feel angry, or I feel disappointed when this happens. And also notice your body language among your friends. And sometimes we all have our friends who hide things really, really well. But you and I both know that there are the friends who like they're just like, oh my goodness. And sometimes their tone of voice is a clue that says, you know what, they're really struggling. And so pay attention to those things. All right, Kia.
Uh, and so we'll wrap up, this habit. And so another important thing is to seek to be understood. So listening, like genuine listening, involves understanding and also being understood. I put here this quote from a song that's popular by a singer named Nina Simone, who's from North Carolina. And so the probably most popular line from that song is, "I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood." So I thought that was appropriate for this presentation tonight. But seeking to be understood actually takes courage, right? Which is like, we've got to be willing to do something that, like, maybe we're stepping to the unknown, or maybe it feels a little maybe even a little frightening. Sorry about that. Um, we also have to like give feedback. And giving feedback is really just giving information, but before we do that, again, we're not listening to just respond or take action or swoop in and do something, right? But think about, like, what's my motive behind this? Like, what's my intention? Am I giving this feedback because I want to control the situation, or I have all these assumptions, or am I giving feedback because I want to be helpful to the situation,
Mm.
or I want to achieve just helpful or better communication? And then I think, let's see, Keenan said a good practice for I statements earlier. So, yes, using I statements instead of you messages is very helpful in strengthening your communication skills and in seeking to be understood. So, to use I, it's okay. So, using I messages instead of you messages, it's something like, um, "I'm concerned that you have a temper problem. I feel you've been acting selfish lately." Pretty strong examples, right? Instead of saying, "You are so self-centered, you have a terrible
Ooh.
temper," right? It feels really judgy. It could sound great
Yes.
to people. Has anyone here had practice using I statements versus you statements? Yeah, so using I instead of you statements could be really helpful, and not I like, this is what I think. I want to control the situation, but what I am hearing or seeing based on what you're giving me, right? Based on the feedback I'm receiving from you, because I am paying attention to you. I want to understand you and also be understood. It's really helpful. I think there are a lot of pressures to say things, to hear things, and we don't always stay present and pay the attention that we should. And I totally understand that, especially being in school,
Mm.
with everything that's going on. But if we could, slow down and maybe apply some of the skills that we've learned, it could be just really helpful, again, to just strengthen your communication, which could also lead to, just better, more positive relationships. Um,
Absolutely. Great advice.
right.
Well, we've come to the end of our presentation. So I'm wondering if we have any questions. And there's also our contact information. So certainly feel free if you feel like you wanted to have some clarification on anything that we spoke about tonight. If you had questions about just resources and school, can we share the slides? I believe we
Yeah,
are.
I think
Yeah,
so.
I believe we are.
we can definitely share the slides. It's so beautifully done, of course. Yes, so thank you so much, Dakia and Ina, for this wonderful presentation. So of course, you all can put questions in the chat. The first question, can you share the slides? Yes, we will send the slides out immediately after this session. You're welcome. And so my first question, while you guys ask questions, is there any part of this habit that has been a struggle for you in your life? And if so, how did you overcome it? And that either one of you can answer that.
I'll jump in. So I think just listening and learning the I statements, because that's not something I grew up doing. You know, it was sort of like, why are you doing this kind of scenario, or you made me. That was one of my other things. And I work with high school students 24/7, which is like the best job in the world. But we have kids who say, you know, this person made me feel a certain way, and so sometimes just giving their friends feedback, I feel, because nobody really has control over how we feel. We kind of give people control over how we feel, and we all have to make those decisions. You know, I always use the example of, if somebody called you, Regine, I'm going to pick on you. So if somebody said, "You're awesome," how would you feel?
I would feel great.
Okay. If I said, "Regine, oh my gosh, you are not getting this," how would you feel?
I would feel sad.
Okay. Right. And if I said, "Gosh, you're acting like a chair," how would you feel? Well, I like to look at her body language. How would you
Yeah.
feel?
I'd feel like I was nothing.
Or what? Kina would be like, "What?" That's exactly right. Because if you think about it, when we say, "Wow, you're awesome," we have a lot of positive attachment to that. That's that perspective thing we were talking about. If I said, "Wow, you're not getting it. How come you're not getting it? You're so slow at getting it." It's negative, right? But if you said, "Stop acting like a chair is kind of a neutral thing. There's never a situation where a chair is bad or good. I mean, unless you don't want to, you know, if you don't want to stand, there's a chair is fabulous. But generally speaking, we attach meaning to words. So that's that perspective and maybe your own experiences coming into play. And so I just encourage everybody that when you're in a situation and you're starting to hear something, do all those things we talked about. Look at the body language. Maybe somebody's saying something, but they don't actually mean it insulting in an insulting way, but we perceive it that way. And then if that's the case, then you want to ask for clarification. Or in a situation where you're like, "Oh, they should be doing it this way," when it's okay for somebody to be doing things in their own way.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ina. So, Dakia, the
Mhm.
question is there any part of this habit that has been a struggle for you, or anyone that you've known? How did you overcome it? How did they overcome it?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the seeking to be understood part, and really, I'm someone that sometimes wants to like just kind of swoop in and get to it based on like a lot of my own assumptions and my own, perspective. So what I've had to do is like kind of step back from that. And so I like to use I statements. I try not to be blaming or judgy. But that's hard, in talking about things that take courage. I'm not someone who always wants to go into something like blindly or the unknown. So I just kind of have to take a minute to tell myself, like, this is probably fine. This is a human, like I'm a human, like they want to understand, like I want to understand. And then, just go in it, I guess, as genuinely and as gently as possible. So just reminding myself, like, they want me to understand them, but I also want to make sure that I'm understood. So.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. So, my last question, if you guys don't have any more questions, my final question is, what advice do you have for teens who don't feel heard? Do you have any resources to share with our teens or with our parents who may be with us tonight?
Sure. Well, I can share. If you, I think the best place to start, if you are not feeling heard or misunderstood, to start with a trusted adult. Even if you're not at the point where you want to say, this is all that's going on, or this is all that I'm thinking about, just saying something like, I have a lot on my mind, or, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like there's something, it's a really good place to start. And like I said, a trusted adult, that could be a teacher or a parent, or I don't know, whoever, maybe an aunt or an uncle or something like that. If you're not feeling heard, if you're not feeling like someone's listening, if you're feeling misunderstood, that's a great place to start.
Absolutely. That's my number one go-to strategy. The other one is to maybe make a list. You know, if you're at home, kind of journal about it, or make a list of, these are the things that I want somebody to hear about me. And then as we were talking about, maybe problem solve. So you could say, so again, if I want my teacher to understand what's going on, here are the things that I want to make sure they understand. And then, you could practice in the mirror. The great thing about being at home, you can practice in the bathroom mirror. Nobody has to hear you. You could practice with your dog or cat, and have that conversation with them, and just kind of role play. And the other weird thing is, like, check on YouTube, because YouTube has lots of different videos for how do you tackle lots of scenarios. So I've had students who've had some great some success there, finding some ideas.
Thank you guys for sharing. It looks like we have them. Keenan just gave some advice as well to add on to what both Dakia and Ina said. I feel like it's always good to me to ask people if they are okay with me going in on my feelings. That way they understand that I need to be heard, and they sometimes listen. So allowing people to know, like, hey, this is what I need. This is the kind of space that I need right now. That is excellent. That is excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that, Keenan. My dad listens too much. Do you guys have any advice for Andrew?
No, I think that's great that his dad's involved. I think that is honestly the best thing, that tells us he loves you and he's involved, and you can probably learn a lot from him. I think that's cool.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing, Andrew. Does anyone else want to share anything before we wrap this up? If so, go ahead and put it in the chat while I say a few things. First, thank you so much, Dakia and Ina. Thank you so much for this presentation. Habit number 5, I think, is my favorite, or one of my favorites, because I love to learn. I listen to my dad too much, Jamie. Awesome. I love to learn. I love to hear, or to allow teenagers to kind of hear how to be heard, what ways to be heard, how to be a genuine listener. That chart is something that always just shocks me, about how much of communication is not even words, the words that we say, but it's in our body language. And I really think you guys did a great job in just showing us how to be better, genuine listeners. So thank you for that. And for all of you guys, thank you, of course, again for coming tonight. We have 2 more habits left. One on Tuesday, which habit number 6, and habit number 7 is on Thursday. Please, we ask that you invite your friends if you would like. We would love to see you back here on Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you guys have a good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Right. Thank y'all.
Thanks.